Welcome back to the third and final day of AI and Intelligent Automation Live APAC. My name is Sally Fletcher. I'm the head of online events, and I've been your host for this conference for the last couple of days. So yesterday we had a great day. We covered, first of all, some really kind of future forward-looking sessions from Lauren DeLisa Coleman, Digicultural Trend Analyst and contributor for Forbes on future trends and AI. What to watch for as a future workplace ethics and machines massively converge. Next, we had a great practical session from Black Klein on robotics and finance and accounting. Then we had a session on industrializing and tracking your RPA program through RPA Balanced Scorecard with edge verb emphasis. And finally, embracing intelligent automation, a step change towards smarter operations with Hexware BPS. Today's our final day, and we definitely have some exciting presentations for you. Just two presentations today to round off our session. The first is obviously starting right now. We've got Abhishek Verma. He's the VP for APAC and the lead for operational excellence at Credit Suisse. He's going to be speaking about launching RPA projects, proof of concept and result analysis. Then we will be looking at how to build a 100% in-house team with Olam International. Their SVP for Global Business Services, Morty G, will be looking into the adoption path and plan to grow RPA. So just a little bit about your first session. The first session really weighs up the benefits and risks of pressing forward with robotics, covers a tick list of what you should be assessing, and covers other necessary knowledge to ensure the success of your RPA projects. And that includes understanding the basics of RPA, its potential approaches and benefits, evaluating risks and managing them, engaging stakeholders in identifying opportunities for RPA implementation, and planning a successful RPA pilot initiative. I'm going to hand over to our speaker, Abhishek Verma, to talk to us about this session.
Hi, everyone. I am Abhishek, and the topic of my talk today is how to plan and launch robotic process automation pilot projects. Coming back from the experience I've had, I think the talk would give you a kind of synopsis of what are the do's and don'ts and what are the key areas we need to kind of hone down on before we would want to successfully implement a pilot on robotics process automations. Next. Well, just a brief snapshot of my career. I have spent around 18 plus of years of experience in the industry. Worked across diverse areas like aerospace and defense, where my career started, and then you see a very young me to in my present role handling the transformation and innovation with Suisse in the APAC region. And I've worked across diverse industries, diverse service lines, HR outsourcing, procurement, banking and financial services, financial accounting, and that's pretty much it. Next. Now, it's a classical question of launching a disruptive transformation. With the pace technology is moving in the industry in the present day context, I think it becomes more of a go fetch exercise. So if I am a baby boomer or I am a Gen X, it becomes even complicated by the fact that the way technology is moving, and at that pace it becomes difficult to adapt to the continuous changing dynamics. So robotics process automation, it's a product, it's a kind of methodology now, and with the technology and with the rapid change in the landscape of the industry, with limited revenue margins across different function lines, it becomes important for us to adapt and learn new technology levers, which will help us to reduce costs and operating expenses. And what is most important is, do we have the right people to do that, and leverage from the skill sets and amalgamate the skill sets with the technology. Next. So for an organization, there are three main levers if, at a high level, what we need to keep in mind. One is people, and somebody has, kind of rightly pointed out, people are the biggest assets. However, we need to keep a little bit of a kind of focus on the strategy from a people, process, and technology standpoint, and kind of have a trade-off with clear-cut mission statements around that. So if we are, it's human capital, I think, the strategic vision for any organization is how do we utilize the people to actually generate revenue, and how do we utilize them optimally to reduce operational costs. And from a process standpoint, again, strategic vision is, do we have the right organizational process design? And we need to kind of pause and think, okay, maybe not. So I think again, kind of uh, not boiling the ocean, but definitely, setting the thoughts in motion around that question. Technology, again, we're talking about our product here, which is very, very, technical. And do we have the right innovation and the automation strategy, which will help us to achieve the aim of around reducing operational expenses? And very important is from, kind of each of these three levers need to be aligned to each other from a strategy perspective, and then from in kind of clear cut lanes, swim lanes around their particular areas, need to have mission statements. So if it's human capital, I think we require, to enhance revenue, sales ninjas are so called, who would, generate new business to the organization. And from a cost reduction perspective, I think clear cut innovation experts to, reduce operation costs. From a process standpoint, I think that the clear cut mission statement is, automation to kind of automate the manual tasks and re-engineer processes so that we have the right design to actually, achieve strategic vision of reducing your operational costs. From a technology standpoint, I think one of the levers to innovate and automate is through robotics process automation, and kind of clearly amalgamate it with, some other levers or tools to actually get clear cut exponential gains at the end of the day. Next. So the key questions need to be asked. If I'm a CHRO or I'm in the leadership table, what are the key questions I need to ask from a human capital standpoint? I think a no-brainer here. Do we have the right people to drive my overall strategy and my mission statements? Do we have the right leaders to actually drive that innovation leadership on the table? And last but not the least, what is the strategy we should, kind of adapt? Whether it should be, everything should be adopted within the captive area, within in-house, or should we build up the team in-house to drive the robotics storyboard, or there has to be an outsourcing strategy? We require vendor partners, we partner with them to, drive the overall mission statements. Next. So if I'm a layman and from a human capital standpoint, what I see is technology has arrived, and it's kind of working. It's working well. It's there in the buzz. The buzz is there in the air that yes, we have a lot of technology levers for us to adapt and kind of get some quick exponential gains. And some of these tool sets are able to handle large transactional volumes, which is kind of kind of eliminates pain at the end of the day from a transactional standpoint. And technology, many of these tools is like a monkey. You just kind of configure it, and it's going to just follow instructions. So the key subject line, the key message I'm trying to highlight here, is it technology which is more important, or is it the people who are there who would kind of adopt that overall technology to get the exponential gains. So I think the key mantra is that we need to have the right people at the right time with the right attitude to go and adopt the change. And we're talking about disruptive transformation here. We're talking about getting efficiencies to the tune of X person across the organization, and and with a kind of process designs we have in the organizations, the huge matrix structures, a lot many swim lanes, global footprint. I think to reduce the overall complexity, I think we need to have the right people with the right attitude to adopt change. Next. So what does it lead to? So, key question before I start on my transformational journey and disruptive transformation is, do I have the organizational design to support any disruptive transformation as is? Okay, maybe yes, no. From my experience across, driving a disruptive transformation, most of the organizations are not ready to actually adapt quickly. I think the key message is the processes are very broken down, and they have regional footprints. A region A might not follow the same process design as a region B. The people would not be following the same operating procedures across the processes within that particular process function. That we might have an A, X, and Y's existing. So I think some of the problem statements are manual processes, which is an opportunity for us to go ahead with robotics process automation. The process design, the processes are broken, and they're definitely not seamless, standard. The transactions are repeatable, but then don't have very clear-cut, well-defined steps, and of which is kind of leading to low throughput at the end of the day. A lot of errors, human errors, and needless to say, we are humans. We make mistakes, and a lot of errors are occurring in the processes, which is leading to cost of poor quality or cost of errors kind of going high. So I think under this current as a scenario, I think it offers us the maximum opportunity to go ahead and create that environment of amalgamating a product like robotics process automation, bringing it within the organization, and going ahead and kind of creating the infrastructure which would go ahead and support that particular strategy. Next. A perfect example of a merchant closure process, and then it's just a very high level, level two kind of process flow, where we see a transaction coming in from the input, flowing in. There are decisions there along the way. What we see is it seamlessly doesn't go till the end of the output. So many decisions which are taking place within the process, which is not utopic. And it involves some oversight, some decisions from humans which need to be taken into play. And if you see the no's, they are so-called, the exception path, as we say, which is not so utopic for a seamless robotics process, robot to actually go and handle the transaction. And if the ones you see in green are all the yeses, a seamless flow from input to output of a transaction. However, if you see, quite a few get dropped down due to the exception path, and you have very less clean transactions flowing till the end. Now, if I need to go and robotize 100% of this process, I will not be able to do that. For me to actually create that utopia, or and we all know that utopia only exists in vacuum, a utopic state. However, in order to make it robot friendly, we need to go and segregate a process into happy paths, which is the one highlighted in green, and so-called not so happy parts, which is the exception, transactions which are flowing through the decision process. So I think re-engineering a process before going and automating it would create exponential benefits at the end of the day, rather than go ahead and do as is. Because from my experience, if you automate a process without re-engineering it, you will create inefficiency exponentially rather than getting gains at the end of the day. And I think that's the key message for us from an organizational process design perspective. If you would want to automate, good, we have a lever, we have a product. However, we need to take a step back. We need to think through processes. We need to create the right organizational design in terms of infrastructure, in terms of processes or the type of businesses we are in, standardize it. Just an example of how would we want to make it very design friendly for our product to work, and then go ahead and automate it. Next. If we do that, I think the goal is to have the right process design. We would be able to, win half of the battle. So if we have the right infrastructure, we have the right process design, we of course have the right people, because that's I think the key strategy driver. I think we are as good as about to start. Half of battle is won. The next half starts now. Next. Hence the message, we should quickly adapt. Being Generation X's, we should look at being millennials. We should kind of be very, very friendly with technology. Keeping also one thing in mind is a structured way in which we want to create the disruption, and kind of go away with our old thinking of being averse to change, being open to driving in disruptive transformations using any one of the technological tool sets. Here, robotics process automations, bringing in a robotic product which will help us drive a strategy. But of course, kind of also amalgamating it with some of our traditional methodologies of re-engineering processes and creating the optimal process design. Next. Okay, I have the right people, I have the right processes. What about technology? The product I'm trying to onboard, an RPA tool, for example. So I think some of the key questions before you want to, get in, go ahead and adopt a particular product and onboard it within the organization. Should I invest in transformation and integration projects? Why do I take so much of pain? Why don't I just outsource my work? Let my vendor partners go ahead and do it. I'm just thinking, okay, fine, that's a question. Valid question. Second question which comes into my mind is, if I invest in technology, then which automation strategy should I have? Should I go big bang, or should I go incremental, parts, take baby steps, and then go ahead in a much more controlled fashion? Last but not the least, the question which comes into mind, which product should I choose? There are quite a few products available, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, UiPath. Hey, I'm confused. Now, which is the product which will offer me the best features, the best functionality, which will be optimally tailored as per my current organization process design? Next. So before we go ahead and answer these questions, as we progress through the storyboard, I think just, for layman's, what is robotics process automation? Starting from the 1984 movie Terminator, where, the bots had taken over the world, or there was a threat, to Star Wars, where, you saw a lot of bots. I think we come into traditionally, mostly in the services industry, where what is robotics process automation? It's nothing but an intelligent macro. And we all know our, macros, we have heard about macros. which uses existing applications to actually go and mimic human action. So if an Abhishek is sitting there on his seat, and if I'm trying to process an invoice, for example, or I'm just trying to book a trade, I think it's going to mimic my action, very, very repetitive. It's going to go and do the exact same steps, and then go ahead and um, process it along the way. So that's pretty much it, and it's a no-brainer, and it supports almost all types of environments, whether it's Windows, web-based. It's hosted in particular environment, for example, Citrix, or it's Java or .NET based platform. It goes and automates such kind of structured and repetitive transactions, which does not, where we don't have to take any decisions or human or logical decisions. As I pointed out, works through Citrix and RDBA environment. So it's again a competitive differentiator. Eliminates any kind of reeking of data, which is cost of poor quality, what I just mentioned earlier, and also copy pasting between multiple streams, and also kind of easily moves and manipulates data at the UI layer, and integrates well with traditional EAI. So that's more from on a definition of RPA for dummies. And next, some of the use cases from the industry by function in. So insurance, you have some examples which are given there. In the financial services industry where I come from, I think a lot of areas where I personally have implemented these use cases, and I mentioned some of them here. Some of the use cases from some other industries in healthcare, and some, last but not the least, some of the use cases from the human capital management area, where again I have implemented some of them myself. So we have been talking about robotics, process automations, but why do we actually want them in the first place? We have a human capital, we have a working population, we have skilled manpower available with us. I think some of the primary benefits of robotics process automation, and the primary one is it automates repetitive work which are very, very mundane, transactional, and manual. And if we are able to kind of eliminate such kind of activities, what we are going to do is we would be able to free up our skilled human capital to do more value-added tasks. I think that's the key message, and to drive overall that strategy. Of course, on this, it looks good on the CXO table. We are going to get some ROI out of it. However, from a human capital standpoint, I think what it does is it frees skilled labor so that we can do some more value-added stuff. And the secondary benefits is it also helps in reduction of those manual activities, which leads to overall errors at the end of the day. Next. So we have touched base upon what is RPA, what are the benefits, we've been talking about them. But now we come in some key limitations of robotics. I think one is that it only reads data accurately from in SC format. Second, I think a limitation is that it only reads data in electronic format, text format. But if it's a scanned image, it kind of is not with the kind of accuracy it's expected to do read data. Again, in a scanned format, if the text is handwritten, I think then again it's definitely limited by the fact to read and kind of go ahead and process that particular information. And last but not the least, which I have covered, is unable to handle exceptional scenarios and make decisions out of such kind of scenarios. Next. So overall, if I have to look at the cost benefit, I think definitely we touch based upon the benefits, which would kind of be full-time equivalent saves, and also maybe the cost of poor quality. However, from a cost perspective, I think like license cost is the key over and above. So many products which are available in the market, have various pricing patterns in which they, build their customers. Second is the development effort for kind of building that macro or custom configuring the RPA product for that particular process area and automated fully. I think that's where it gets added on to the cost, and also includes the cost of training. So various certifications available on particular products. So I think we need to train our resources. If it's in-house, even for the vendor, if we have outsourced our work, I think there's a lot, they might bill us for, these additional expenses. And last but not the least, and which I call it the hidden iceberg, which is, sometimes it becomes a white elephant, is the RPA maintenance costs. So we might be creating potential white elephants, or we might be creating potentially sometimes untrained monkeys. We don't want to them to run and become out of control, right? So we require the product to be scalable, to be sustainable in the long run, and handle kind of scenarios which humans would trained and experienced human would be able to do that. I think for that we require a clear-cut, infrastructure cost and an infrastructure army or a maintenance team to go and monitor and supervise. Next. I think with this, we've come to the first part of, some of the tools before you would want to kind of start our robotics journey. What is the typical planning we require to do? I think the next set talks about how do we go ahead and run a POC, an actual POC. Next. Next. So if I'm able to, I have chosen, I've planned on my robotics product. I've put in a contract now, and many times it happens is that I would want to go, before I sign a contract, also do a pilot. And I think some of the finer points here would help the audience to actually go about doing or uh, implementing their POCs in the respective organizations. So the key consideration factors before we get into pilot is the product, the tool, and then maybe the execution strategy, whether it's captive or should we go with the vendor to go ahead and POC it. Do we have the culture? So we need to create a culture also. So cultural creation means, do we have the right people? Do we have the right infrastructure? And do we have the right leadership to actually go ahead, full support of the management to go ahead with the POC? And last but not the least, do we have the right set of processes to institutionalize it, scale it up later on? Next. The first step of the which comes into, before we want to start is on a journey is the product per se. So what should be the selection criteria? And from my experience, these some of the finer points which we should keep in mind before we actually choose a product. So from a tool aspect, I think it's functionality, type of functionalities it's able to handle, usability, ease of use, how we easily we can learn and we can use it, and and how user friendly it is. Third point is scalability. I think for any organization after POC, we should be able to scale it at a larger level. I think that also plays a part in choosing the tool. Capability of in terms of do we have the right skills to handle this type of product in the market, in-house or outside. and the service provider reputation. So if we, the product vendor, how reputable uh, are the customer success stories and testimonials. I think these are some of the areas we need to keep in mind from a tool standpoint. Again, from an implementation provider. So from my experience, RPAS or robotics process automation as a service is amiss nowadays. No clear-cut solution provider is there who offer the product know-how as well as the implementation know-how. So either we have product companies or we have service companies who provide the execution piece. But amalgamating both of them, I think that's where I think it's still a gap in the industry. So implementation provider, I think some of the finer points who would want to go ahead and execute this, it depends on the capability. Do they have certified people? Do they follow a structured regimen in terms of planning, the entire piece, in terms of re-engineering the processes? Responsiveness, how responsive are they in terms of, any bugs or fixes, or in terms of any other potential gaps which might fall in execution. Maintainability, of course, we touch based upon that point. It's the maintenance aspect of things, potential white elephant. So how good is the maintenance team in terms of handling problems, bugs, or maybe in a change setup, change process scenario to go ahead and maintain that particular POC. And last but not the least, stability. That's the key. So whatever solution which has been deployed by the service providers, how stable is that particular solution? So also that's one of the key parameters. The third area which I would want to discuss is the solution effectiveness. So how complex processes they have handled. So what was the level of complexity of those processes? At what level, were they handled? Plus the diversity of those processes across industry lines, across sub-functions. I think some of the parameters you need to keep in mind from solution effectiveness, the solutions implemented by a particular tool and the service provider. Then output efficiency. Again, at the end of the day, we are here for getting some efficiencies. So minimal cost, maximum output is again a lever we need to keep in mind. And feasibility. So how feasible the solution was. So I think some of the finer points we need to keep in mind under the effectiveness of the bot solution, which has been historically developed by the service provider and the tool. And cost, of course, cost many times in a very price sensitive environment, we look at only the cost, but I think some of the other points are also very important. So from a cost perspective, what is the product licensing cost? We need to keep in mind the related infrastructure costs, and last but not the least, the vendor consulting cost. From my experience, from one of the product companies, which I would not name, on robotics, RP product companies, the vendor consulting cost was immense. So POC was done for free. However, after that, the consulting cost, they charge us a bomb. And I think that's one of the key areas we need to keep our focus on, which might potentially be a time bomb. Next. Culture is the key. Right people within the organization and who act as levers or catalysts for change is the key. And I think culture creation is important, but culture is people, mostly in organizations, and we need to have the right people with the right attitude. I think we keep stressing on that. So I was lucky, my experiences, we had the right people or people mix who actually were catalysts for creating the change or this on any transformation journey. Next. So an offshoot of that, forming a cross-functional team. So the right people, I believe, right attitude, having know-how of what needs to be done from planning to execution. So from a business standpoint, you need to have the right sponsors, the right chosen processes for doing the POC. From an IT standpoint, we need to have the right technical expertise to actually offer consulting knowledge. From a business excellence standpoint, we need to have the right people who would actually be the consultants, eyes and ears of the management to identify the optimal design before we want to go ahead for the POC. And from a risk standpoint, I think we, and IT as well as process risk, we need to get those clearances before you would actually want to start on the POC. Next. Institutionalizing. So how do we compile an inventory of processes? That's a good question, and many times we go wrong on this. I've burned my hands in from my initial experiences on robotics journey. I think the key things which need to be keep in mind is how wide would we want to go ahead and how deep we want to. So from a pilot standpoint, I think it's important we should just not go very deep. We should just look at maybe from a functionality perspective, execution perspective, some of the low hanging fruits, and then go ahead and automate processes. From institutionalization perspective in the long run, I think it's very important during the POC we should choose such a process which maybe has a global footprint or a similar process which is there in other areas, regional as well as functions, which can be looked into. Payroll, for example, we have payroll, a global organization which has a kind of region, a footprint across the globe. So a payroll in India, for example, or a US payroll, or maybe any other country is very specific to statutory regulations. So I think a good area to actually POC might be payroll in human capital management. So I think that's where we need to choose a POC, which can be scaled up later on globally. Payroll, for example, and how deep we can get into it. I think that also needs to be looked into. So can we automate it 100%, 80%, 70%, blah, blah, blah. Next. Well, I've kind of already mentioned this. We need to select RP-able processes, not processes per se, or not a business pain. Many times it happens with my experience. The business just comes back to you. Okay, this is my most painful process. Please go ahead and automate it. It's easier said than done. I think there's definitely a science behind it. We need to identify, create an inventory processes as mentioned earlier. However, we should focus on the low hanging fruits and not the pain. Processes with more happy paths and less exceptions. And processes for which there is in the near future no upgrade, no system upgrades are planned, whether transformational or whether process specific or no scale up is planned in the near future. Next. So again, I haven't started on my execution journey. I haven't started on my POC. Before that, I need to design and engineer my processes. We need to create a data environment for data-oriented processing. So what do we mean by that? I think what it means is, for example, in a process, we might have different sources of data coming in from different regions in different forms. I think that's a pain. So based on simple principle of garbage in, garbage out, what we need to do is create a data capture utility, for example, create a standard format of data being captured at the input, and then go ahead and automate. I think that's very important for us and one of the thumb rules for a successful RPA POC. Second is we enrich that data. So we talked about the exception paths. If we have, say, for example, X% of exceptions, we need to ensure that go into the happy path going forward. We need to identify the gaps and go and eliminate them. Next. Very important. we need to partner. What do we mean by that? We need to partner with the product vendor. We need to partner with business. We need to partner with the execution partner. If it's an outsourced vendor who are doing the execution, we need to partner with them. We need to partner with in a highly metrics organization, IT teams, the relevant risk teams, and of course the business stakeholders. So partnership is the key for any successful POC. All need to be in sync, and effective understanding needs to be there in terms of planning. All are calibrated and also calibrated on the success criteria of the POC. Next. Now, once I've created a bot, I've created a bot. It should not be a terminator, right? So in order to prevent that scenario from happening, we need to have the right test cases. All the scenarios during my UAT, if a bot has been configured, I need to have all the test scenarios covered, including exception scenarios. So I think that one of the key areas is partner with the SMEs or in the subject matter expert to actually list down all the possible test scenarios as possible. Go ahead, complete the testing before we actually want to productionize the bot. So I think these are one of the key areas we need to keep that in mind. Next. So once we have created a bot, we need to maintain it. So it's like we need to nurture it like a baby. An infant once comes into this world, right? It's dependent, right? It's easier to give birth to a baby, but difficult to maintain. So I think that's where a bot needs to be nurtured like a baby infant. We need to constantly monitor it, kind of be a babysitter, ensure no bugs are occurring. If they are, we need to have a process, a kind of service level process where bug fixes are being done. We also, in terms of change requests, if change scenario, the process changes, or maybe a system upgrade happens, we need to follow a regimental change request process as part of a maintenance. And last but not the least, what happens if a bot fails? Right? So do we revert back to the earlier model if a human is going and doing that particular area, or is there some other backup plan? Next. So once I have completed a successful RPA pilot, what next? My experience tells me the vendors are excited. The product company is excited. Okay, we have done this successfully. Now let's scale up. Let's sign a contract. The execution providers, okay, we're providing services. We have a certified developer. We have business analysts. Now let's go ahead and kind of include it in our master services agreement. But from an organization standpoint, it's very important for us is after doing a RPA, we need to form an RPA center of excellence, which is a heady mix of people, process, and technology. The right people, right attitude, you have a leadership, you have a right organization process design on that, a person leading it, person governing it, from execution standpoint to maintainability standpoint. And of course, we have the so-called enabling functions, business excellence, we have risks, POCs identified, we have a steering governance identified, and we have a kind of an organization within an organization set up to actually go and deploy RPA. So next. What happens if my pilot is unsuccessful? Oops. Well, back to the drawing board, is it? I need to understand why it failed in the first step. Can be the people related, people not skilled enough, training not enough, maybe too short a lead time for that, or maybe the content not being fully exhausted. or maybe an SME, a business SME not devoting time properly for the requirements capture to a process, a complex process chosen as a POC, or the most inefficient one. And from a technology, I think maybe tool not kind of mapping with the process chosen, or maybe the legacy applications are too volatile for the product to handle.
Thank you, Abhishek, for that fantastic presentation. If you'd like to ask questions of Abhishek, please join him in the chat room, which you can access if you click networking in the vFairs platform, and where you've been logging in to look at all the booths. And speaking of that, this is actually one of your last chances to access the content at our sponsor booth. So go and check out the booths from all of our sponsors, click on those booths to get extra content, to get extra information, write papers, reports, and also templates that can help you in your RPA and AI journey. I will be meeting you back here for our final session at 2:30 p.m. Singapore time, where we'll be looking at building a 100% in-house team versus outsourcing, Olam's adoption path and plan to grow RPA. I'll see you at 2:30.